Hi, folks. Steve Urban here. Today's episode of the Riderflex podcast is sponsored by Marketing 360. My good friend JB Kellogg and his team do such a fantastic job for us and so many other companies. Marketing 360 is the number one platform for small business, and it's everything you need to grow your business. If you need marketing support, I really encourage you to contact them at marketing360.com/Riderflex, and we'll add that link to the description of this episode for easy reference. On today's episode of the Riderflex podcast, we have guest Paul Foley. Along with being a serial entrepreneur and Colorado angel investor, he's the director at Rockies Venture Club and the co-founder and CEO of Smart Capital. Some great advice here for aspiring entrepreneurs, startup executives, and co-founders. I really enjoyed my conversation with Paul, and I think you will too. Paul Foley on the Riderflex podcast. Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing well. It's a good Thursday.
Yeah, it is. Happy Thursday. Are you in Boulder today?
Denver.
You're in Denver?
We office right next to the Rockies Stadium here in Denver.
Oh, nice. Okay, very
Awesome.
good. Now you're a native, aren't you? Didn't you grow up here?
Yep. So born in Boulder, grew up in Louisville, and then spent my first 18 years here, and then went to Michigan, spent some time in Austin, and then came back.
So tell us about your family a little bit. Are you? Do you have any siblings?
Nope. So only child. So
Okay. All right.
super spoiled with attention. So,
What'd your folks do?
So my mom was a project manager for Storage Tech, which is basically a storage company in Louisville. And then my dad ran a Colorado printing and paper company. So my dad
was it his, or was he a partner or owner?
Yeah, so he actually started it the year I was born. So he was working for a large paper company in South Denver and driving down every day. And then there was the owner of the company, but my dad was kind of the operator of it. And then when I was born, he didn't want to keep that commute's like a 2-hour commute, and he didn't want to keep doing that every day. And then also Boulder and North Colorado was kind of expanding. So he kind of took the same kind of model and then provided paper and paper supplies to kind of the North Denver up to like Fort Collins area.
Okay. So the entrepreneurial bug, is that where it came from? You saw your dad and some of that. Is that where that started?
Yeah, I was cheap labor. And by cheap free. So during summers, I was helping with all the paper deliveries, and he was explaining how all the business worked, and
very good,
driving me around to clients and all that stuff. So yeah, it definitely rubbed off.
And was he? I'm just curious. As a business owner, what was his specialty function? Was he great at sales his expertise, or was operations? Like, how would you rank his functional buckets? I'm wondering how that applied to you as you were growing up.
Yeah, so it was interesting because it was kind of like a lifestyle business before Tim Ferriss and lifestyle businesses were cool.
Okay.
He had an MBA in accounting from CU Boulder, so he's able to do all the finance stuff, and so he's able to understand how to operate a business from like a cash flow perspective.
All right.
And then he's also a very social person, so he was able to get a lot of kind of connections and get indoors and stuff like that. So it was interesting because it was never more than I think like 2 or 3 people. He had a printing facility which would print all the products, but then he would be the one to deliver it and take the orders and manage that area. And so kind of like for the 20 years of operating it, he just kind of was able to make pretty good money on it and just keep growing. So keep doing it. So it was interesting. It was kind of, he was the dad that was, well, he'd take me to all those things, but he was also like my soccer coach, and he worked from home, and he did all that. So he was like always around too, which was great.
Cool. Well, you're right, though. Most of the time, the finance guys, the number guys, they're not necessarily the most personable. So that's great. Okay, so he had the great personality, plus he could run the numbers. How about your mom? Now, was she an introvert, extrovert? Like, what was her style? I'm just curious.
She was more introverted, super hard worker. She's very detail-oriented. Everything was, so her job was kind of implementing tech systems at Storage Tech. So everything was like a process, and there was always like routines. So it was a very routine-driven household.
Okay, all right, very, very good.
By this time, wake up by this time, breakfast at this time, by this time.
she's going to be listening to this, and she's going to go, "Now I wasn't that strict," and you're going to be like, "Yeah, you were."
No, she was. She's Italian mother. That was, yeah.
Is that right? She's Italian. Was your dad Italian too?
Irish.
Irish,
So
Irish Italian. Okay.
yeah,
All right. All right.
yeah.
Very good. Well, I appreciate you sharing that with me. How did you choose Michigan?
So that was interesting. So my dad actually kind of gave me an ultimatum where he said he would pay for college if I got into a top 5 engineering school. And I actually think he didn't think I was going to get in.
Now, did he want you to be an engineer or you wanted to be an engineer?
I wanted to be an engineer, so I was really good at math.
Okay.
It was funny. I always excelled in math and science, but I was never very good at. Well, I didn't focus on writing and reading, so
Okay.
I always leaned towards more analytical stuff. So anyway, he was kind of like, he wanted me to go to CU, and obviously CU is an in-state school, and I would have gotten some scholarships and things like that. So he said if I wanted to go out of state, which I did because I grew up in Louisville, which is right next to Boulder.
Yeah.
I didn't want to just go down the street for college. I wanted to kind of expand.
Yeah, of course. You want to get away from the parents a little bit, party a little bit. I mean, it's like, come on. I want to meet some new people.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't want to be like partying at CU and then all my sudden see my parents.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I totally get it. Plus, I mean, hey, Michigan engineering, I mean, come on, that's awesome, right? Except for the winter, right? I mean, you thought winters were bad here. When you got up there for the winter, were you like, oh shit, this is
Yeah, actually it was kind of surprising because to your point, Colorado's cold, like obviously.
Yeah.
And so I didn't think there would be much transition. I think the first one was very surprising. And it was more because of the sun. Right, the sun goes away in Michigan.
Right.
So it can blizzard, but then it'll be sunny the rest of the day. Whereas in Michigan, you kind of just don't see the sun for like 3 months ish.
Yes. Oof. Wow. You went to the football games?
Yep, all the time. That was like Saturdays were for football games. You would wake up at the morning.
100,000 people. You were there.
110,000, largest stadium in NCAA football.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I bet that was intense. I bet that was so much fun. I mean, you probably lots of memories from Michigan, right?
Oh, I loved it. And that's why I kind of picked it, because we talked about like a top 5 engineering school, but it was also one of the more social places you can go to. I don't think I would have done very well if I went to more of a rigid.
Okay. All right. Now, as you're going through school, do you know? I mean, you probably have no idea what you really want to do at that point, do you?
No. So actually, and one of the things I credit Michigan for is the first year for engineering, you're not supposed to declare a major. So
okay,
they actually have a class where you go and you have aerospace, mechanical, industrial, and operations. And I initially went in thinking I was going to be aerospace because I really was fascinated by space, and I always thought it would be really cool to do that. But when I started taking classes, they would give you like mini classes in each one, and I realized I wasn't anywhere near as excited as some of the other aerospace engineering folks. Okay. And I really kind of gravitated more towards business, but like a mathematical type business. So I chose industrial and operations because this was before machine learning and all the hype around it, but it was a lot of math, stats, and statistics, and that gets used kind of in machine and deep learning now. So.
Okay. Now, while you were there, any social, like super close relationships, girlfriends, whatever? I mean, like anybody, like you're like almost, anything crazy, or you just like, no, you just had a good time the whole time you were there?
I just had I was pretty single throughout my
That's good. You can tell me about all those when we
my choice. It was
okay, good.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll meet for beers and you can tell me those stories. Okay, very good.
The same kind of crew for the 3 years I was there. So we had our freshman year dorm experiences, and then we kind of jumped around houses. It was our sophomore year. It was 7 guys in a house, and so I never joined a frat because it was like a mini one of those already. So
seven guys in a house. I'm having visuals right now. Matter of fact, I'm thinking about all the good times you guys had. Yeah. Okay, very good. All right, so you graduate. Yep. Then what? Then you land a job with one of the big consulting firms, I believe, right? Talk to me.
Yeah, exactly. So I joined Deloitte Consulting. So my
they came to the campus and recruited you? I'm guessing they had a recruiter. Is that how they signed you?
Yep, exactly. They recruit hard, and so it was actually I landed the job I think in my like first or second month of senior year. So senior year became like a huge ton of fun. Deloitte. So I actually yeah.
So hold on, I got a visual. You're a senior. you know everybody, you're having a great freaking time. You land the job at Deloitte, you're like, you're set, right? You're having, like, you're like,
New Year was fun. Yeah.
you're like, I don't know what you guys are doing, but I'm set. I'm going to have a good time the rest of the year. That's awesome. Okay. Very good. Good for you, by the way. And congratulations. I'm kind of joking around, but that's a big deal, right? I mean, first of all, to get into Michigan, engineering degree, Deloitte comes to the campus, recruits you. I mean, that's not a small thing. So congrats. Okay, cool.
Oh,
All right.
thank you.
Yep. Then what happened? Then you go to work for them.
Yep. I do not like it. So I chose Deloitte because it was kind of like a general option.
Right.
So I was in this weird mix where imagine 2011. So 2009, basically the markets had crashed.
Yes.
Detroit specifically had gotten, so 45 minutes away, had gotten slammed by this kind of, they were actually, I think, in a depression where the rest of the country was in a recession. And so, and I was like, the major I was in was kind of math related to finance. So I was always thinking I was going to be an iBanker or something like that. And I chose Deloitte because at Deloitte, they were saying, oh, we have technology consulting practices. You're going to be exposed to a lot of cutting edge tech that these kind of enterprises use. Okay. So I thought that was cool. And then I show up to Deloitte, and then my project is implementing SAP, which is like a legacy technology and like from 20 years ago.
Boring.
And so it was kind of boring. Yeah, it was super boring. And so I actually left within 7 months to join a startup.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead. The startup. Yeah. Go ahead. Walk us into that. Cause I think it was somebody you knew or a friend of yours or something. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it was actually a friend at Michigan who joined IBM.
Okay.
And then actually left within, I think it was like 2 or 3 months to join the startup. And I had moved from Michigan to Austin to join Deloitte. And he came out there to kind of do business development. It was an iPad customer loyalty software. We sold, it's called Belly. We sold into small businesses. But he had actually moved from Chicago and had left IBM in Chicago. Started in Chicago with the founder. He was like the second employee. And then he came out to Austin where I was, and he was like, we met up at Whole Foods, and he was like, do you like Deloitte? And I was like, man, I don't know about this. He's like, I left IBM. He's like, you should join the startup with me. We can like build out Austin.
Okay. Now hold on. You guys didn't meet at Whole Foods. You met on 6th Street at Austin at a bar, and that's where he talked to you into Come on. Come on. All right. Cause he's like, come on, man, come help me join this. And you're like, well, how do we get paid? Let me guess. The next thing he said was, well, we're not actually getting paid yet, but come on, it'll be fun. Right.
The courting process took around a month, and there was a lot of going out to 6th Street for that month. Cause he was in Austin. I was in Austin. And obviously we had been friends in Michigan. So the reason I joined is actually they raised $1 million from Lightbank, which is
sweet. Okay. All right. So people actually were getting paid then. They were taking a salary.
Yep, exactly. And also it was growing quick. So one of the things that Belly did a really good job of was initial distribution into these small businesses. So I kept seeing it everywhere. And Alex and Patrick, who were down there, were doing a great job of getting it out there. So I was like, okay, like this is viable. I'll get paid. Not as much as I was at Deloitte, but still get paid. And so
when you called your dad and you said, hey, I'm giving up this big job at Deloitte to join a startup, what did he say? Just curious.
So my dad kind of shrugged. My dad didn't really like react to it. My mom's very risk adverse, right? Okay. So my dad started his own company.
Right.
He's been through ups and downs.
Right.
I think if he were to do it again, he probably would have tried to start it earlier. And my mom was kind of the more like stay in a corporate job for 10, 20 years and then you can go start something. So I think she was really against it, right?
Okay. Right. Yeah. You're like, by that time, you're like, I'm doing this.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just kind of like, I'm in Austin, you're back in Boulder. Like,
all right, cool. So you join them now. When you joined, I don't know how much you want to share with me, but when you joined, was it early enough for you to be like a co-founder or a major equity holder, or were you kind of too late for that? I don't know.
No, so it wasn't a co-founder role. It was I think I was in play 18 or 19. Okay. So you get like a small amount of options. So you own like percentage or percentage of a company. So it's kind of more you get upside if the company does well, but you're not at that stage where you're.
Okay.
What I really liked about it though was the amount of responsibility. So the way you can imagine this is there's 18 people. There's Chicago is the headquarters. There's a Wisconsin kind of like team, 2 or 3 people, and then there's an Austin team. And so like in Austin, there's 3 of us. So and the whole mission was just sell Belly iPads and support the customers in Austin. So we could make up marketing campaigns, we could host parties, we could figure out sales strategies. It was like a ton of responsibility, and I was 22, 23 at that time.
Love it.
So I thought that was really cool. Yeah.
Love it. Were you sales, marketing, strategy? You were kind of doing all of it?
Yeah, it was like we did everything. So it was
Wow.
sales, marketing, all that. Yeah.
You're knocking on doors. You're like, hey, you want to buy this? Hey, you guys
Yeah,
need this?
you're literally walking in. Imagine a coffee shop, and you're walking in. You're going up to the cashier, and you're saying, "Hey," like you would always be like, "Are you the owner?" Because that would flatter the whoever's at the front, and they'd be like, "Oh no," and then I'd be like, "Oh, we have this cool iPad. We sell like customer loyalty stuff." You like show it to them, and then be like, "We're in this like the store across the street. Like,
Yep.
can we
Yep.
talk to your manager, owner, whoever?" And then you would get the meeting, and you try to sell them on the product and get them to try it and all that.
I think what's really cool there, if we can just pause for a minute, I think a lot of people that know you, or they think they know you, or
Yeah.
they look you up online, they see the Paul Foley today, right? Rocky Ventures Club and all the stuff going on. And they forget like, hey bro, I knocked on doors. I was door to door sales in Austin. Like I lived the shit. Like I didn't just wake up and, be this
Right.
person I am today.
Right. Oh, there's a lot of yeah. Totally.
There was a lot of hustle in there, a lot of hustle in those early days. Okay. By the way, were you guys probably weren't making very much money, right? I'm guessing you were not paying yourselves very much.
It was like so like imagine a like a low base, and then based on your sales you would get like
Yeah.
like a high salary if you did really well.
Having fun. You're 22. You're in Austin. You're knocking down sales deals. You're like,
Yeah,
this
totally.
this is great.
I was still living in like a pretty nice apartment, like on South Congress in Austin. So I was like right next to the Bat Bridge, if you're familiar with Austin.
Yeah, cool.
And, it was like fine for like a 22-year-old. I think yeah, it was great. That's the time too to, I think, I'm not going to discourage anyone from starting a company at any time, but I think a lot of younger people kind of don't realize that you have these years after college that you can kind of do a lot of experiment, like kind of figuring out what to do.
Yep. You can
don't have to.
Yep. You can take more risks. There's not like three little kids at home waiting for you to feed them and pay the mortgage.
Exactly.
All right. So walk us through a little bit of the career then. So after Belly, they sold, I mean, that lasted for a little bit, and then walk us into the next couple of things you did right after that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So Belly was interesting. We raised $10 million from Andreessen Horowitz, which is
Wow.
unbelievable. Yeah.
Wow. Were you in those conversations?
No, not at all.
Oh.
I wish. I was like, I would just get the updates on the weekly calls about how the race was going. I do remember by Southwest, we had raised the $1 million. We were expanding really quickly. Our sales strategy was get the iPads in the store. So a lot of times we'd incentivize the store to use the iPad by giving them a few months free of having the iPad.
Of course.
So basically it was like a no-brainer. They
Yes.
said, oh, you're going to give us an iPad that we can use obviously for the customer loyalty, but then like if you're the staff, like you can play around with it, and you're going to give us 2 to 3 months. So the company to buy all those iPads had to burn a lot of money, obviously, but the distribution strategy was working. We were getting in a lot of stores. And so for South by Southwest in Austin, which is a huge startup event, we actually were responsible, the Austin team was responsible for throwing parties for these investors that were coming to town for that, and basically getting as many iPads in as many of the venues for South by Southwest as possible. So that way, when investors came, they would see everything. So we would have these like private parties for VCs and stuff like that. And I'd get to meet a few of them, but I wasn't in the actual like.
Okay, but right in there though, you're starting to get some experience, rubbing elbows, shaking hands, talking to these guys. You're like, okay, I'm learning how to work relationships and all of that.
Right. Exactly. Yep. And then I'm like, to raise $10 million from Andreessen Horowitz is hard.
Yeah. I'm guessing you guys had maybe a small little party that night.
Yes. We actually went to Wahoo's Fish Tacos, which was one of our biggest supporters because we were the Austin team.
Okay, cool.
We went to our Wahoo's party.
Very good. Very good. Okay, cool. All right. So then what happened there?
Yeah. So Belly was, so they raised $10 million, and then there's more expansion plans. And there's kind of like an interesting inflection point. I was okay at sales, but I wasn't great. And the other thing was I didn't want to I'd been doing sales for like 5-6 months. So imagine just going around knocking on doors, doing this like hustle.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I joined the startup for was to kind of continue to grow and build kind of like expertise. So the options were kind of stay. So Alex, my friend who recruited me, was now going to Boston. And then the idea was either I would go to something like Houston, Dallas, or another territory and do this.
I see.
Or continue to kind of build out Austin. But it wasn't like a growth trajectory there. So it was like this really kind of, at the time, a ridiculous statement / or request by me. But now that we got the $10 million, I said, hey, like I want to be moved to like a VP role or a director role or an analyst role or something in like headquarters. And they were kind of like the people they were hiring for those roles were much more experienced. They had done it in other startups, et cetera. And so then it was this kind of weird thing where it was like, okay, well, if he's not going to continue to sell and I'm not going to get promoted, then it's kind of like, we got to.
Okay. All right. Yep.
So it's kind of like an awkward, like, okay.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Yep. So then you're like, I'm going to start my own thing. I'm doing my own thing now.
I was adamant after that. I'd been at Deloitte. I'd seen a growth I'd started reading a ton of books on startups, and I was really influenced by the $100 startup and the 4-hour work week. And I was listening to Tony Robbins podcast and like all these things.
Cool.
I ended up moving to Boulder, and then I started a consulting company. So one of the things that at Deloitte, I'd been setting up SAP, which was a large ERP system, right? Okay. And then I had also set up some of the Salesforce for Belly. There was a company called SolidFire in Boulder that needed help setting up NetSuite, which is like a smaller version of it.
Was that your first client when you moved back? That one right there?
Yeah.
Did you had that one client when you moved back to Boulder? Was that your first client?
Yep. That was, I was looking for what I wanted to do next. I got introduced to Chuck, who was the recruiter at SolidFire. He said they were looking for kind of like a analyst or like kind of almost a similar role to like what I was looking for in Belly.
Yeah.
And then I met with the director of finance, Derek Cross in Boulder, and they were setting up NetSuite. And it was a really interesting discussion because he had actually experience with Oracle and setting up ERP systems. So he was looking for someone to like help with that. And they didn't want to pay the huge consulting rates for NetSuite consultants, which were like $220 an hour.
Can I just ask real quick for clarity here? Now, did you set that up and get that first client and your new consulting firm before you moved, or did you move home without any clients and nothing, and then you had to go get the clients?
That's exactly. I moved home.
Okay.
And then I hustled. I was doing all kinds of like little projects. I was making like a ninja app game. But it's like, set the scene. It was just like all of a sudden I had I just was going to give myself this bandwidth to go and try to start something. All these books I was reading about people starting like consulting companies or starting product companies or all this stuff. And I was just like, you know what? I'm going to just start something.
I'm going to do it. Now, did you have a little savings, or were you like calling mom and dad going, hey, can you spot me? Like, I'm just curious. Is that too personal? I'm just wondering how did you eat? Like because you didn't have any clients at first.
Yeah, totally. So the first 4 or 5 months in Boulder until I got the client, I lived with my parents, and then I did have savings. I was fortunate, and this was actually my dad that did this. I was a soccer referee in Boulder all through high school, and I was a lifeguard. And my parents actually would take half my paycheck, force it to go to some kind of investing.
Ah, nice.
And my dad actually was I don't know if it was, he watches a lot of Jim Cramer, but he invested in Apple in 2009. Like my savings account, and Apple crushed it over the next this was now 2012. So 3-year time span. So I had a little bit of chunk, but I moved in with my parents. I still had some spending money, but at the same time, and then I was like, okay, I'm just going to try. I was again 22, I was turning 23, and I was like,
is your mom looking at you like, you wouldn't be living?
Yeah, my mom, like, bless her heart, she's like the most supportive person of me. Like, she's always in my corner. But I do remember there was like 2 or 3 months in, she cried, because it was just like, you have the son that graduated top, like very high level of his Michigan engineering class. He got a great job at Deloitte, and now he's living at home. Trying all these projects that aren't working.
That's so good. I can just almost hear her saying, "Can you call Deloitte back? Is there somebody?"
Yeah. Well, the other thing too, I was actually getting a lot of people still through LinkedIn and then just through referral connections. Were still offering me a lot of like base level jobs that would have paid me basically the same as I was getting at Deloitte or Belly. So I was actually like pushing those off to try and do this. So in my mind, I wasn't that worried about.
Gotcha. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. So you do consulting. You can now this is another key point, I think, here for the listeners.
Yeah.
I'm just going to assume for a minute that during this 3-year gap that you were roughly 3 years, you were doing the consulting, I think.
Yep.
You are just connections, networking, relationships, connections, networking, relationships, boom, boom, boom. You're just knocking those down, building relationships in Boulder during that time. Is that accurate?
Yep, 100%. It was 3 or 4 coffee meetings, like maybe per day.
Yep.
um,
Yep.
at least per week. And it was the other thing too. So imagine this. So I'm doing consulting and I'm setting up NetSuite and then Salesforce for SolidFire. And SolidFire turns out to be SolidFire got $10 million from NEA, and
Okay.
SolidFire sold a NetApp for, I think it was $890 million. At the time, they were around 20, 25 people. I was this kind of consultant. My initial rate was low. So I thought it was high because I was getting $25 an hour.
Yeah.
And I thought that was like great because it was kind of almost the same as like the income I was getting before depending on, it was like 40 hours a week.
Okay.
And then it got bumped to 80. And then for my next clients, so after SolidFire, it was Full Contact and Logarithm Advanced Solutions. I got bumped to 100 plus. And eventually I was getting more than I was making at Deloitte off of this consultant within like a year and a half. I was making, yeah.
And just you, by the way, did you have any help, admin help or anything? Or just you running it by yourself?
For the first kind of like year and a half, it was me running it by myself. And then I brought on a partner because we got a lot of requests for this was when HubSpot and inbound marketing was blowing up. So a lot of the startups were like, how do we do internet marketing? How do we use our systems to kind of get leads and stuff from traffic? So I brought in Steve, my partner, who was able to get a lot of the consulting contracts for internet marketing and Marketo and HubSpot and other systems that clients were requesting.
Okay, cool. So you're cruising along, you're kicking ass in your consulting. Now you're making really good money, pretty good money for that age.
Right.
And at some point you meet somebody, something happens, you meet some guys and you're a co-founder at Augur. How did that happen?
Yeah. So through consulting, so the coffee meetings, the other thing too, is I would be constantly going and meeting with potential clients, and a lot of them were startups.
Yep.
So a lot of them were kind of early, and what I would do is I would basically refer, so they weren't going to be able to pay for consulting services, but what I would do is refer smaller apps. So like not everyone needs Salesforce or NetSuite, but they could be using something like Xero, or they could be using something like TechDrive, CRM, or Base, or other apps. So these small apps that I started to use. So I would always refer these apps, as well as meet startups, because I knew if they ever raised funding, that's how you get potential future clients. So I was meeting with all these small startups.
Bingo.
Also, it kind of hit me in like two and a half years in that, like, while I was doing this, like, I think I was really influenced kind of by these products that I was consulting for. Like, they were, like, again, SolidFire sold for $890 million. Aventus was growing like crazy. Logarithm was going to go, back then they were going to try and go public within 2 years. And I kind of realized, like, if you really want to build something massive and you have to own like a product, a services-based business. We started trying to hire associates, and that wasn't working. We hired teams in India, which kind of worked for scaling, but services-based specific was kind of like you only get paid when you work. And I was seeing all these startups and products and all these things that were making money without kind of like that same level of service/effort.
Right. I think that's a key point right there for the listeners. You're around it, right? You're performing your consulting duties for these companies, for these founders. You're seeing what's happening. You're seeing them sell or go through transactions, or, you know, sell for millions of dollars. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, I need to be over there with those guys.
Right, exactly. And the thing about NetSuite is it's a financial accounting system, and then also it has a CRM, and then Salesforce is kind of getting in customers. So you would see these processes, you see how much it would make. I was getting to see the internals, how much they were spending on all the employees, how much what their margins were, all these kind of like things that like you don't read about in TechCrunch. Like you're literally seeing the day-to-day, what the burn is, what the sales are, what the projections are, all of it. And so like and that's actually, how people were like, oh, isn't that kind of boring? I thought it was like amazing. I was constantly being like, how does this all work and how does it operate and all that stuff. And
then did you make the decision strategically in your head where you're like, okay, the consulting thing is cool, but I'm going to eventually connect myself to somebody and we're going to start something together in the tech space? And was that your plan?
Oh. Yep, totally. I started, one of my friends, Ben, who he was a year older than me in high school, but he was a great software developer.
Okay.
We would literally try and, so we use in Boulder too. And he was like a VP of engineering for a kind of faster growing company. And so we always like played around with ideas. So it was constantly like, let's build an app, let's do things. But what ended up happening was I met Augur. So I actually met this company that had gone through Techstars, and I started getting kind of involved in the Techstars program. And what was interesting is Augur specifically had two really good developers, but they were not inclined necessarily to sales and to kind of more the operations and growth of it. They were
Okay.
really talented engineers.
All right.
So basically, they had this really interesting product or this really interesting tech. I thought it was pretty interesting, so I started sending it to kind of my network that I built up, saying like, "What do you think of this?" Just kind of out of curiosity about the company, and the response was overwhelming. Like there was a guy, an investor that tried to buy the tech for like $1 million straight up. We got interest from some angels that wanted to potentially invest in it. So the angels in Boulder asked us to sit in their office and kind of build it. And so like all of a sudden, I went from kind of like doing these services-based business. So they had really cool tech. The two kind of co-founders wanted to work with me because they thought that I would, which I did. I had the operations and kind of sales skills that would help them scale and like sell this. So we basically started working together. We did this for like 2 or 3 months to kind of validate what was possible.
And they're asking you like, "Hey man, an angel investor wants to talk to us. Come to the meeting with us, bro. Come over here."
Yeah. Well, I was introducing them to angel investors, and then they were like, "Yeah, you should come to those meetings with us and like sit there." And then they also got like they had a bunch of interest from pretty big companies. So like Vanier Media. So I'll tell you about the product in a little bit, but like it was like Ziff Davis, Vanier Media, IMM. These bigger ad agencies and publishers were actually like kind of poking around because they had cool tech.
All right.
Like they just weren't they weren't speaking the same language basically.
Now at some point you're like, "Hey guys, this is cool, but I need to actually like be on the cap table, and you need to write me in for like let's have a little chat."
Yeah, exactly. So it was 3 months of just kind of like vetting each other and seeing like how it was going to go, and then it got to this point where it was like, okay, it's like this. It looked like we could raise money for it. It looks like we had our initial paying customers, and I was like, so I joined as like a 1/3 co-founder.
Okay, cool. Well, good for you. I mean, yeah, that rightfully so, right? I mean, that's great. Okay, cool. Yep. So now you're part of the equity. You're part of the cap table. You're part of the. Okay, now you're like, okay, now I'm in. Yeah. I'm in, and I'm in at a point to where if we make this work, this is going to be my first big payday. That's what you're thinking at this time. I'm assuming.
Yes, totally. I'm looking at it. I was a little different. So I joined as COO, and the CEO and kind of main founder looked at it as like this was his like baby and prized possession. I looked at it more like, okay, let's experiment with this, let's grow it, let's see how much value we can create. And like I viewed it more as like this is going to be like interesting.
Okay,
right?
I see.
It was very clear that there was we got introduced to Oracle pretty early on, and they started to pilot. Like I said, Vanier Media and Gary Vaynerchuk's firm, like their CTO reached out. We had the initial angel investors that were sending us intros, and IMM and Boulder immediately started a pilot. So it was kind of this interesting.
Great.
Like it was getting traction, and I'm like, okay, like I think there's something here. Let's figure this out. And then we raised. So we had like a first angel investors and term sheet. That ended up falling through, but we ended up getting there was another firm that was actually interested at the same time, and then they invested into raise $700K, and then we were off to the races. We ended up basically there was a CEO that kind of we added on, so we moved the CEO to CTO, brought on a new CEO who was going to scale it, and then all of a sudden, like within 2 months of him coming on, he sold it for a lump sum. So it was like very quick. It was a 2-year time span total.
Boom, there you go. Yeah. And that company sold. You were an equity holder. You got your first big check as a founder.
Yep, exactly. And
good then for you. Good for you. Congratulations on that. That's a major win, by the way. Good job. Good job on your part of keeping your eye open, right? I think that you built relationships. You were servicing people as a consultant. You were networking. You had your eye open. You were looking for opportunity. You were hustling. You saw those guys, you're like, I think they might have something. I'm gonna help these guys right here because this could be something. I mean, great job. Congratulations on that. So then at that point, it looks like, from looking at your profile, it looks like you said, okay, cool. I really enjoy the investing piece, the helping the startup piece, the angel piece. Like I like all of that. I don't know if I want to go run another tech company, but I want to, just like your LinkedIn profile says, I want to build angel groups. Like at some point you kind of said, okay, I'm going to do this now for a living, right? Is that what happened?
Yep, exactly. So I started like a mini angel group with my roommate at the time. So we called
Okay.
it Connect Your Investments, and we were going to go and invest in a few companies around Colorado.
Cool.
And then I was going to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I was actually really interested on the opposite side. So I think this happens naturally to founders who raise money. They're kind of curious on what VCs think and what angels are thinking.
Mhm.
And so I actually was going to go and potentially work for a VC fund. So I was actually going to be like, okay, now like my next step would be VC related. So I actually spent a lot of time after Augur. I spent like a month in Oakland Airbnb. I
Okay.
spent some time in Menlo Park, like 3 weeks in Menlo Park,
Okay.
kind of thing around there. I went to New York. And so I was kind of like hopping around Airbnb and kind of exploring what options were next. And then I got Jesse Lawrence in Boulder was running a startup studio called Boulder Bits. And he had this really interesting idea for how to do a fund-to-fund model, which
Okay.
would allow you to crowdfund a VC fund potentially. And so we basically started working on that project, which was called Smart Capital. And that seemed like a great fit because I was learning a ton about VC and how the LP structure works and how terms work and all of that. So that's kind of the segue from there.
And Smart Capital now is your baby now as a co-founder. I mean, it's you and one other co-founder. Is that right?
2 others, Jackson and John.
Okay. Okay,
Yeah.
great. And can give us the 1 minute Smart Capital overview. Just
Sure.
Yeah. Yep.
So angel groups have some, like Rockies Venture Club has 200 members, 200 plus members. And so when we invest in a deal, it's really kind of like herding cats, right? So you want to basically create what's called a syndicate. So you create an LLC, and basically the members will invest into the LLC and they'll do smaller checks. So this allows an angel investor to, instead of writing like a 100K check, to write a 10 or 20 or 30K check and then aggregate it with a bunch of other angels to then invest into the company. So if you're a company, you're always warned against having 30 investors on your cap table, because when you do anything, you have to get everyone to sign the docs and be attended. If you're an angel investor, usually you have that means you have a high net worth, and so a lot of times you're in the Bahamas or you're traveling, and hurting those people is tough. So with an LLC and a syndicate, you basically can do one structure and then invest. And these are like micro mini funds. So what turns out hard about that is doing it manually. You have to hire service providers like accountant, taxes, lawyers, etc. And so what Smart Capital ended up turning into was this aggregator to allow these kind of syndications to happen and invest, and angel groups can invest in the research companies.
I see. Okay. Very good. Okay.
Yep.
That's how that ties together. I appreciate you. Okay, great. All right. And you've had Smart Capital. You've had Smart Capital now for 2 years.
Yep, exactly.
Now it says, I love how on your LinkedIn profile, it says part-time.
Right. Well, the full-time right now is RVC. So,
okay. All right.
So RVC is the largest, most active angel group in Colorado. So we run around and we invest in early stage companies in Colorado. Last year, we invested in 24 companies. We invested $5 million as a group. And then as a whole, we invested with our partners $60 million in the companies in Colorado. And in 2020, sorry, go for it.
Oh, sorry. I interrupted you. Okay. I was going to tell you, I know this really cool growing recruiting firm called Riderflex. No. No. I was just giving you a hard time. Can I ask you a couple of questions here? Advice for listeners. I know that you deal with, you see pitches all the time. You deal with founders all the time. And there's a lot of people that listen to our show that are trying to start a company, or they want to start a company, or they got an idea, but they're scared, or they don't know where to start. I'd like to ask you a couple of questions around those topics for advice.
Sure.
How about the first one is, when it comes to selecting and picking your co-founders?
Yes.
What advice would you give somebody that wants to start a business, but really is co-founder dating and doesn't want to do it by themselves? What advice would you give that person that's looking for a partner?
Yeah. So I see this go wrong all the time. So I think if you're an individual right now and you don't have a co-founder, I think actually by starting and doing the things manually, that gets momentum. And then once you show potential traction or show that what you're going to be working on works, you can bring in the right partners and co-founders and kind of coalesce from there. Okay. I'm actually, so the advice is always like, go find the founders and then go build stuff. But I actually recommend, if you're a solo founder right now and you're really passionate about a certain industry and a certain company, go just start it yourself. And then as you start it, you'll collect the founders as you go. One of the things that was successful with Augur is kind of the my two co-founders, Noir and Brandon, definitely needed an operations / more sales marketing person.
Mm.
But they were able to get it started and get it off the ground. And then as they went, they were able to put in the pieces that was kind of necessary, right? And then I see that a lot with kind of founders. Now, the other thing too is if you do have somebody that your complementary skill sets, so one's sales and marketing and one's kind of the developer or engineer, and you are both passionate about the same thing and you go start, that's great. What I see go wrong though is you have two sales and marketing people want to work together, and then that usually goes wrong because roles and responsibilities don't get delineated and you're not filling out kind of your other roles. And so you want to make sure that if you're starting with somebody, that they actually have skill sets that you don't necessarily have as a founder. So if you're very technical and engineering focused, you definitely want a sales and marketing person. If you're kind of sales and marketing, you want somebody that's can more be technical, but if you're doing software.
Do you recommend, does everything have to be set up and perfect? And what I mean by that is, do they need a super clean, full blown operating agreement right when they start? Do they need a cap table? Do they need to call a lawyer and have them draw up paperwork? Do you coach and preach that to early co-founders, or do you just say, just go for it, and 6 months later you can do it? What's your advice there?
Yeah, so depends on your situation. So I think if you're starting it yourself and you're going forward, then obviously I think you don't need that stuff because you obviously own it and can make all that stuff and you bring on new co-founders. If you're starting it it depends on the co-founder you're starting it with. Mm-hmm. If you have like a pre-built relationship, and I always say what you should do is you should talk about what the equity splits are going to be up front. Okay. And then as it time, like I think too many founders create the C Corp and go through the legal and all that before it's valid. So I would definitely make sure that you're looking at it valid. But I think what you should do is you should be picking another founder that you have integrity and trust with. So that way when the conversation comes and when that moment happens, it's kind of like you're on the same page about what that founder is going to be. So like with Augur, it was very clear. I made that clear to my two co-founders, like if I'm going to do this with you, then if I do join, it would be as like an equal third co-founder. Mm-hmm. And that made the process when it came, it was no like humongous surprise. Right? Yeah.
Okay. So, I appreciate you sharing that. I did have somebody tell me one time, I heard somebody say, hey, look, put a few checks in the bank and get some revenue going. And then you can worry about hiring a lawyer to draw up some paperwork.
Yeah, exactly. Because what you don't want to, I think too many people spend a bunch of money to get things started and they don't realize like you can get things started without that. And then once it's started, then figure that stuff out.
Okay. Very good. All right. And then how about on the topic of pitching, right? I know like I bet when you probably just go to dinner at Boulder or Denver and somebody's like, there's Paul Foley. Let's pitch him on the idea we have right now. Let's pitch him right now. I mean, you've seen a million pitches, right? How about and I know you could do a full-blown podcast on just this topic, but how about just a couple of, pieces of advice around, look, if you're going to pitch an investor, do these 3 things for sure, or give me something high-level advice there.
Yeah. So we actually have a class on this in RVC. Every month we have a pitch academy. It's 5 hours long. So it's
great.
That's actually the biggest. We find a lot of good companies who are actually founders are well-spoken give really crappy pitches because they don't know what investors are looking for.
Do they have to pay? Do you have to pay to pitch? How does that work?
So if you're just for education purposes, then yes. If you're going to pitch the group, so if you're going to pitch RVC, then we give you the training free because we want you it's basically the week before the forums. So you'll take this 5-hour training. We'll tell you exactly what the investors are looking for. And then it's up to the founders to perfect their pitch for the next week where they're going to actually pitch to something, 2 or 3 forums, and each forum has like 20 to 30 angels.
Okay. Oh, that's great. Okay. By the way, what do they just go on Rocky Ventures Club website and that's on there if somebody listening to this.
And then it's under Entrepreneur Pitch Academy.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So top advice for people that are giving pitches. I'm sure you could talk about this for hours, but what do you want to share?
Sure. So the big thing is so the problem solution, those are like obvious. And then traction and then exit strategy. So I think where most founders don't do well is on that exit strategy and the traction part. So I think a lot of founders are like, here's this huge problem and we have this idea for a solution. Where we find companies fall on their face is in the traction slide. So showing that they're able to execute and build the solution for the problem. as well as on the exit strategy. So I think a lot of people get this confused when they pitch angel investors and VCs. When someone invests in you, they want their money back with a return. So the idea, so it's great that you have a problem, a solution, you're passionate, but you also have to like make it believable that you're going to execute on it, and also tell them what your exit strategy is and how you're going to think about it. And most founders do terrible at that.
I see.
And so the advice we always give is when you're, so one of the other things with Augur that I was like aware of is we actually got the $1 million offer for the tech like pretty early on.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like, we started looking at multiples of what companies that were doing our similar products were getting funding for, as well as what they were exiting for. And so we were able to kind of like know that a lot of companies were getting bought for like between this 10 to $100 million amount. There was a few exits like right when we were starting to gain traction for around 50.
Okay.
And so we knew that was probably the like target that we could go for. And like, yes, you can go for the $1 billion and the huge exit and be the Elon Musk. Also like $50 million as like a younger founder, or for anyone really, is absolutely life-changing. Okay. And so I think a lot of people they'll say the big vision and we're going to be $1 billion company, but you want to always have optionality where it's like, we know this is an off ramp at 10 or 20 million. We know this is an off ramp at 100 million. We know this is an off ramp at 250. And then if it all goes well, we'll go public at 500 million plus.
I see. Okay. I see. Great. That is great. That is great information. Thank you for sharing that. Can I ask two questions on the trend, on the traction part? Does that traction have to include, hey, here's how much revenue? I mean, are you looking for early revenue right there? Does the traction need to include revenue?
Think about it like this. Think about it like you have to make it believable. So if like Elon Musk walks in a room and says, this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to send people to space, he's probably going to get money because people will think he's able to execute on that.
Okay.
Right. If you're a first-time founder, then I think you need some kind of level of traction to make it believable. Right. Okay. So people are just looking for, obviously the problem and solutions exist. And I think every good investor realizes that. But the where you weed it out is what teams are going to be able to actually execute it.
I love that. I love that, Paul. Thank you for sharing that. And then on the exit, does the exit have to include a 5-year financial blown out model where it's showing EBITDA over 5 years and right here's where we're going to sell? Like, does it have to be that specific?
I actually think financial projections are, I'm different than some VCs. I actually think financial projections are extremely telling, not because they're accurate, but it's how the founder thinks about the company. So one of the first things I ask a founder to send me is their financial projections. It's very telling to me if they don't have it. And I'm kind of like, so I'm going to give you money and hope you do well with it. Like that would be like getting in a boat and they don't have a map. And you're kind of like, so we think we're going to cross the ocean, but we have no idea where we're going or how we're going to get there.
It's going to be really fun though. Come on, let's go.
Yeah, exactly. We know it's there. We know it'll be fine. Just jump on.
Okay, very good. I appreciate you. Okay. All right. And then thank you for that. That was great info around pitching. Just, I know we're almost out of time. How about cash raising? What big advice do you have for that person sitting in front of that angel investor for the first dinner and they're trying to come up with the balls to ask for $500,000? What advice do you want to give that person?
So imagine going in when you're raising money, imagine going into a conversation and saying, hey, this is a way we're going to make you like not only get to the goal, this is what you should be caring. A lot of angels will invest in this sector. So they'll care about getting to the goal. So if it's life sciences, they'll care about changing the world in a positive way. But it's also like, we're going to change the world in a positive way and we're going to make you money in the process. And if you can come in there, that's why financial projections I think are good, as well as your mindset around it. If you're coming in there and being like, we're gonna solve this big problem and we're gonna make money together, and that's how you're framing it and you're coming across that confidently, then I think like a lot of people would be willing to give you money. I think if you're timid or you're unsure if this is gonna work, you should try to figure out what the assumptions are that are like limiting that. But like the founders that I love are just like, here's a huge problem. We know it's a problem. We started executing on it. We think this is going to be big. You could just feel it. You just feel, you know, they know what they're doing. You know, they think that this is going to be big. You know, they're going to execute on it. And you know that if you give them your money, it's obviously risky, but there's a chance that they're going to be able to return that at a large rate. And so those are the kind of founders you want.
Great. Okay, cool. Last two questions. I'll make it fast. Do you think all these startups should use incubators and accelerators? Either or one of the two? Should they be focused on trying to get in one of those, or What's your advice there?
So the other thing too, I'll say this, I think a lot of companies aren't ready or shouldn't be raising funding. I think it got sexy to raise funding. I think that was kind of blown up in the media. I think actually a lot of businesses should really look at models that, hey, maybe this makes sense to just do a normal growth, like without that. I think you should really understand that first. And then with accelerators, I highly recommend to founders that are going to be on the VC track and their bundles make sense to apply to an accelerator. I think they're extremely helpful. I have seen, especially in kind of YC and Techstars Network, founders trying to apply just because they want the title or the label, and they're not in it because they're actually building a business. And I think the accelerators have caught on to that, especially in the last few years. I think they understand that, like, if you get a YC title, you're going to have more opportunities in life. So they're kind of, I think the good accelerators are really kind of wary of that. And I would highly recommend to a founder not to just try and get the title. Okay. It's not going to end well.
Okay. How about this? All in versus part-time. And what I mean by, so many people, they don't have enough savings to quit their job yet. So they kind of have to start part-time. But what do you recommend? Go for it, all in, or?
It depends on your situation. So like, one of the things that I'm doing Smart Capital part-time. One of the things that I find interesting is I don't necessarily it as like a huge market. So like right now for our initial customer base, like it's fine if I operate that part-time. If we raise money or went hyperscale with it, then yeah, I'd have to join that full-time. But right now it's not necessary. I think for raising capital, when you start getting a bunch of customers and you start raising and you're taking other people's money, I think full-time is 100% necessary. So I think if you have like a lifestyle business or cash flowing business, or something like that, then there's no reason. But as soon as you raise or looking to expand and raise fast, then yeah.
That's okay. Great. Last question is this: what's Paul's core purpose in life? If he had to put it in a sentence, and you just had a reflective moment where you're like, yeah, what is my core purpose in life? How would you describe it?
Oh, I think it has to change and evolve, because I think you're going to be interested at things at different times. Like right now, I'm really excited about investing in Colorado companies. Like, I'm from Colorado. It's really cool to see the economic growth. It's awesome to be in Denver and see how many people are here and kind of building that out. So like right now, it's definitely investing and helping early stage companies in Colorado. And then I think eventually, however long, it's going to switch. And then it's going to be, I feel like I've accomplished that, or I feel like I've hit the metrics or the goals. And then I think it's something new. Like, I think the people that went to the moon, like you read about them kind of getting depressed because they come back and they don't have another purpose, another goal. Right. And I think you got to keep kind of setting those and be really excited about something at that time.
Paul,
I used to be really excited about getting just out of a corporate job. That was 2 or 3 years I did my consulting company. Then it was I want to build a tech company, and then it was I want to invest in companies. And, yeah.
Well, I love what you're doing for Colorado, by the way. Love it. Love it. Love everything you're doing. And you have a great reputation, huge following. Congratulations on everything you're doing at Rocky Ventures Club and Smart Capital. The Riderflex podcast features entrepreneurs, business executives, and the stories behind how they got there, as well as daily tips on career advice and job interviews. Our show can be heard just about anywhere these days, but you can visit riderflex.com and click on the podcast page to hear all the previous episodes and learn more about the recruiting and consulting services we provide. Contact us at the email address info@riderflex.com or 888-964-5876. Thanks so much for listening, and if you enjoy our show, please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like the episodes.